The photograph was never supposed to exist. Not because it captured something illegal. Not because it exposed a crime or a scandal in the way the tabloids hungered for. It existed simply because someone pointed a phone at two men on a rooftop in Lower Manhattan at 7:43 on a Thursday evening in October. And the light was doing something extraordinary behind them. And whoever took the shot did not stop to think about what they were seeing. They just tapped the shutter. And in 12 hours, Oliver Hartwell's entire life cracked down the middle like a windshield hit by a stone. Oliver was 32 years old. Go quiet when he walked in. Not because he tried to, but because he could not help it. 6'1", that he never quite managed to keep from falling across his forehead. A jaw that his college roommate once described, in a moment of frustrated honesty, as aggressively symmetrical. He had been the golden son of the Hartwell family for every one of those 32 years. And the Hartwells were not a family you disappointed. His father, Richard Hartwell, had built a mid-sized commercial real estate empire from the ground up in Connecticut, and the unspoken agreement of Oliver's entire existence had been simple. You carry the name well. You marry well. You produce grandchildren. And you keep the machinery of the family running in the direction it has always run. Oliver had accepted this agreement in the way that people accept weather. It was simply the atmosphere he had been born into. You did not negotiate with it, through it, and hoped, on your better days, that it did not rain. He had dated women, and seriously enough to bring them to Thanksgiving. And his mother, Carol Hartwell, had genuinely loved all three of them in the proprietary, assessing way she loved most things that she felt reflected well on the family. He had never been cruel to any of those women. He had been, in fact, almost too careful with them, too considerate, too present in every way that was not the one that mattered. He had known since he was 19 that something in him was pointed in a direction the family did not have a roadmap for. He had spent 13 years becoming very good at not following that direction in any visible way. And then Elijah Carter walked into the architectural firm where Oliver was a senior associate. And everything that Oliver had managed to hold perfectly still inside himself began, very quietly, to move. Elijah was 28, a project coordinator, which meant he spent his first 2 weeks at the firm getting lost between floors and apologizing to everyone he accidentally interrupted. He had warm brown skin and dark soft curls that he kept pushing back from his face with the heel of his hand, a gesture that Oliver noticed approximately 40 times before he made himself stop counting. He laughed too loudly in the break room. By the end of his first week, he had a habit of disagreeing with people in meetings in the most polite possible way, framing every pushback as a genuine question. And Oliver had sat across a conference table from him on a Tuesday afternoon and watched him redirect an entire presentation with 3 sentences, and felt something shift in his chest like furniture being rearranged. They became friends first, because Oliver was very practiced at making things into something they were allowed to be. Lunch. Then, long because Elijah asked too many questions and Oliver never wanted to stop answering them. A shared habit of staying late on Fridays when the office thinned out and the city outside the windows turned gold. Oliver told himself, repeatedly and with great conviction, that this was a friendship, a good one. He told himself this while he learned that Elijah had grown up in Atlanta, that he had a younger sister he called every Sunday, that he was afraid of bridges in a specific and embarrassed way that he described as illogical but persistent. Oliver filed every piece of this information somewhere inside himself that he did not examine too closely. For months on a Friday evening in early October, Elijah had said, out of nowhere, while they were both looking at a set of blueprints spread across Oliver's desk, "I think I've been waiting for you to say something first." Oliver had gone very still. Blueprints. He had just let the sentence sit there between them, and Oliver had understood, with a clarity that was almost painful, that this was one of those moments that the rest of your life would organize itself around, depending on what you did next. He had said, quietly, "I don't know what you mean." Elijah had looked up then, just slightly, with something in his eyes that was not hurt, but was close to patience. "Okay," he had said, back to the blueprints. But 2 weeks later, Oliver had called him on a Saturday afternoon and suggested the rooftop bar in Tribeca. Not as colleagues, as something that did not yet have a name, but was finally, terrifyingly, moving in its real direction. They had sat at a small iron table with the city spread out below them and the sky doing something reckless with color above the Hudson. And Oliver had talked more honestly than he had talked to anyone in years. Not everything. Not the weight of it. Enough for Elijah to reach across the table and rest 2 fingers against Oliver's wrist, very lightly, and say, "I've got you." Just that. He was very sure he had not cried, but something in him had exhaled for the first time in what felt like a decade. And someone, somewhere on that rooftop, had taken a photograph. The account that posted it was a lifestyle blogger with 40,000 followers who specialized in, as she put it in her bio, unexpected beautiful moments in the city. She had captioned the photo, "Caught this at golden hour tonight, and I genuinely cannot stop staring. 2 gorgeous men. 1 perfect evening. I don't know their story, but I know it's a good one." The photograph itself was shot from 15 feet away and slightly to the left, and it showed Oliver and Elijah at the small iron table with the skyline behind them. Amber light flooding everything. Elijah's fingers on Oliver's wrist and Oliver's face turned slightly toward him with an expression that was, unmistakably, the expression of a man who had given something up. Something he had been holding for a very long time. It was a beautiful photograph. Times in the first 6 hours. Oliver saw it at 11:47 that night when a college friend sent it to him with no caption. Just a question mark. And his stomach dropped so fast and so completely that he had to sit down on the edge of his bed and breathe through his nose for a count of 8. Elijah's name was not in the post. But Oliver's face was in the photograph, clear and unobstructed. And he was 32 years old, and his father had business contacts in the city in the thousands. And his cousin Marcus had almost certainly already been tagged in a repost by somebody. And Oliver knew, with the specific clarity of someone watching a slow-motion disaster they cannot stop, exactly how the next 48 hours were going to go. He called Elijah. The second ring, which meant he was still awake, and the sound of his voice, low and careful, asking what's wrong, was the thing that almost broke Oliver's composure before he had even said a single word. "There's a photo," Oliver said. "From tonight." Silence. "It's a good photo," Oliver said, and then he laughed. Once, with absolutely no humor in it. That's kind of the problem. He heard the specific quality of that exhale, which was not panic, which was something slower and more resigned and deeply tired, and he understood that Elijah had been waiting, on some level, for a version of this moment. Had perhaps been waiting for it since the beginning, in the way that people who have been through something before recognize its shape before it fully arrives. "I'll take it down," Elijah said. "I know her. She'll take it down if I ask," Oliver said. "It's already been shared. I don't know yet. I just needed to tell you first." Another silence, and his voice was careful in a way that felt deliberate. The way you are careful when you know the other person is standing very close to the edge of something. "Your family." "Oliver." The question hit him somewhere unexpected. His throat tightened. "I'm at home. I needed you to know before anyone calls you or reaches out to the firm or..." Elijah cut him off gently. "If you are safe. Not your job. Not your father's opinion. You." His hand flat against his knee and stared at the middle distance of his bedroom and let himself feel, for just a second, the full weight of what was coming. His father's voice, which was always worse than the voice. The careful, terrible conversation over dinner at the family house in Greenwich. The one he had been outrunning for 13 years. "I don't know yet," he said honestly. Elijah said, "I'm coming over. You don't have to." I'm coming over. You. He sat on the edge of the bed and waited. And 22 minutes later Elijah was at his door with his jacket half zipped and his hair still pushed back with sleep-mussed carelessness. And Oliver opened the door and looked at him, and the thing he felt in his chest was so large and so inconvenient and so entirely real that it frightened him. They sat on the couch with the television off and Oliver's phone face down on the coffee table, and Elijah said, very quietly, however this goes, you're not going through it alone. And Oliver wanted to believe that in him. But he also knew his family in a way that Elijah did not. And the part of him that knew his family understood that the morning was going to arrive. And with it, things that could not be managed by love alone, however steady, however real. His phone lit up at 12:44. The name on the screen was Marcus. Elijah looked at him and said nothing. Oliver picked it up, not unkind. Marcus was his cousin, and not his enemy. And the call confirmed what Oliver had already known. Someone had sent the photo to his father. His father had seen it at the restaurant where he'd been having a late dinner with a client. His father had not said anything to the client. He had finished the meal, Greenwich, and called Marcus at midnight because, as Marcus now said, carefully, Dad didn't think he could call you directly yet. Oliver closed his eyes. Marcus said, he's not okay, man. He's. Oliver knew exactly how he was. Come to Greenwich tomorrow morning. Marcus was quiet for a moment. You sure? Oliver looked at Elijah, who was watching him with that expression again, steady and clear and offering something without condition. Yeah, Oliver said. Up. He set the phone back down, face down. Outside, New York continued its indifferent nighttime hum. Taxis and sirens, and someone arguing 2 floors below. The city entirely unbothered by the fact that Oliver Hartwell's carefully constructed life had just developed a fracture so long and so deep that he could feel it all the way to the foundation. Elijah reached over and covered Oliver's hand with his. He did not say everything will be fine. He just held Oliver's hand in the dark, and Oliver let him. And for now, for tonight, that was the only thing that mattered. Tomorrow was Greenwich. Face across the dining room table. Tomorrow was the conversation he had been running from since he was 19 years old. But tonight, Elijah was here. Tonight, he was not alone. The Hartwell house in Greenwich was a colonial on 2 acres that Richard Hartwell had bought in 1998 and renovated twice. Each time in a way that said, without saying anything directly, that the family inside it had arrived and intended to stay arrived. Oliver had grown up in its hallways, and the way the kitchen light flickered when the refrigerator cycled on, and the particular quality of silence his father deployed when he was disappointed but had not yet decided how to express it. He drove up on Saturday morning in cold October light, parked in the circular driveway, and sat in the car for 4 minutes before going inside. His mother was in the kitchen. She said, "Your father is in the study." Her voice was carefully neutral in the way that expensive china is carefully neutral, holding its shape with great effort. She did not ask him anything. Absence of questions was itself the most significant statement she could make. His father was standing at the window when Oliver came in, which meant he had heard the car and had arranged himself deliberately, because Richard Hartwell did not do anything that was not deliberate. He was 61, broad-shouldered, still carrying the physical authority of a man who had built things with his hands before he built them with money. He did not turn around immediately, closed the door and waited too, and the silence in the room had the density of something that had been compressed for a very long time. Richard finally turned. His eyes were not. Is it true? It was not a question. Quite. It was the shape of a question that had already answered itself, and was now asking Oliver to confirm what everyone in the room already knew. Oliver said, "Yes. Once." He looked at the window again. Long. Oliver said, "I've known since I was 19. The silence after that was different. Thick. as though it had been filled with every family dinner, and every brought-home girlfriend, and every casual future plan discussed over Sunday roasts. All of it recontextualizing itself in real time. The whole architecture of the past 13 years shifting on its foundation. His father said, "And this man, the one in the photograph, his name is Elijah." His father said nothing. Oliver said, "He's a good person, Dad. He's..." One hand. Not harshly. "Stop." A gesture that said he needed a moment. And Oliver, who had spent his whole life learning to read his father's gestures, gave him one. What his father said next surprised him. Not in the way that shocks you, but in the way that reconfigures something you thought you understood. Richard said, in a voice that was quieter than Oliver had expected, "I am not a man who does not love his son." Oliver did not move. "I want you to know that first, before anything else." Oliver felt something in his chest do something complicated. His father turned fully toward him, but there was something behind the control that Oliver had not seen before, or had not let himself see. Something that looked almost like grief, not for Oliver, but for all the years of distance that had accrued between them because Oliver had never told him, and Richard had never asked, and both of them had managed the gap instead of crossing it. "I don't understand it," Richard said. "I want to be honest with you about that, and the world has moved in directions I was not built to move with easily. I am going to say things wrong." Oliver said, "I know." His father said, "But you are my son." "And I am not." He paused, and the pause cost him something visible. "I am not willing to lose you over this." Oliver's throat was tight, nothing he trusted himself to say yet. His father said, "I want to meet him." "Elijah." His father said, "If he matters to you, I want to know who he is. That is how I was raised to do things, and I am too old to be raised differently." He paused again. "I'll handle it well immediately. I am asking you to give me the time to get there." Oliver looked at his father. This man he had spent 13 years managing around rather than walking toward, and felt something that was not exactly forgiveness but was adjacent to it, something more like recognition. The recognition of two people who had both been performing very hard for a very long time and were now, exhaustedly, stopping. He said, "Okay." The way he nodded when a deal was settled. Then he said, "Your mother is going to need more time than I do. I need you to be patient with her," said. His father moved toward the door and looked back and said, "You could have told me years ago, Oliver." The words were not an accusation. And harder. They were the particular pain of a father who had wanted to be trusted and had never been given the chance. Oliver said, "I know." His father left without answering, which was the most honest thing he could have done. Oliver stood in the study for a long time. Outside the window, the Connecticut trees were losing their leaves in the October wind, gold and red lifting and scattering, the whole landscape doing its annual reckoning with what it had to let go of. He pulled out his phone. 3 words. He said, "It's okay." Back in under 10 seconds. 3 words in return. Oliver pocketed his phone. He looked at the room his father had built, the bookshelves and the leather chair and the framed photographs on the credenza, family holidays and college graduations and Oliver's own face in dozens of posed smiles. And he understood that none of those photographs had contained the whole truth of him, and that going forward, whatever photographs existed of his life, they would. He was not done. And that conversation had not yet happened, and it was going to be harder in the ways that mothers are always harder. More personal, more woven into the particular texture of who you believe your child is. He knew she loved him. He knew the space between those two things was the space he was going to have to stand in for a while, patiently, without demanding that she arrive faster than she could. But his father had said, "I am not willing to lose you over this." And Oliver was still standing, to hope for, on the drive up. It was enough to move forward on. And he opened the study door, and he walked toward the kitchen, toward his mother, toward the next conversation, the one that was waiting for him with all its difficulty and love and necessary pain. Carol Hartwell was rinsing a coffee cup she did not need to rinse when Oliver came into the kitchen. She had her back to the door, which meant she had heard him coming and had chosen, in the time-honored fashion of women who have raised difficult things in silence, to be occupied with a task when he arrived. Oliver sat down at the kitchen island, on the same stool he had sat on as a child doing homework, and waited. His mother turned around. She was a composed woman, Carol Hartwell. She had always been more composed than her husband in the way that often goes unnoticed. Her steadiness mistaken for distance when it was actually the labor of holding everything in a shape that could be lived in. She said, "How long have you been unhappy?" The question stopped him completely. He said, "Mom, I wasn't unhappy. I was just. You were quiet. In a way that was different from quiet. I noticed it, and I told myself I was imagining things. Because telling yourself you are imagining things is easier." She looked at him directly then, and her face had something in it that Oliver had rarely seen pointed fully at him. Something undefended and searching. "Was it because of us? Was it something your father or I?" Oliver said, "No. That's not." He gathered himself. "Did. It was about what I thought would happen if you knew. And I was wrong about that. I should have trusted you more." His mother was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Elijah." His name in her mouth was careful. The way you are careful with something fragile you have just been handed and are not yet sure how to hold. Oliver said, "Yes." Oliver blinked. Sentence. He had expected logistics or theology, or the particular brand of maternal grief that concerns itself with grandchildren and timelines. He had not expected. Simply, "Tell me about him." He said, He's from Atlanta. He has a younger sister he calls every Sunday. He's the kind of person who remembers what coffee everyone takes, and then acts like it's no big deal that he remembered. He laughs too loud. Oliver stopped, and his voice was quieter when he continued. "He showed up at my door at midnight last night without being asked because he knew I needed him there." His mother looked at him for a long moment. She said, "That sounds like someone worth knowing." Oliver felt the back of his eyes burn. He pressed his fingers flat on the countertop. His mother said, "I am not going to pretend this is easy for me. I want you to know that I am being honest with you right now. And I think honesty is better than a performance of acceptance that I would have to maintain and you would be able to see through immediately." She folded her hands. "And the thing that I have always wanted for you, Oliver, since you were 4 years old, and you used to fall asleep on the couch watching baseball with your father, the thing I've always wanted is for you to not be alone." He was crying now. Permission to cry. But it was happening anyway. Quietly. The way it does when you have held something for so long that the moment it finds an opening it simply moves. His mother came around the island and put her arms around him. And Oliver, who was 32 years old and 6'1", and had been managing his own emotional weather for 13 years in solitude, put his face against his mother's shoulder and let her hold him for a full minute without saying anything at all. When she pulled back, she cupped his face in both hands the way she had when he was a child, and she looked at him with red eyes and said, "I need time. I want you to give me time and not interpret time as rejection." He nodded. "When you're ready." "Not as an audition." Oliver said, "He'll like you. He's good at people." She almost smiled and turned back to the counter because she had reached the limit of what she could hold in the open for now. And Oliver understood, and he let her have the turn. He drove back to the city in early afternoon. The Connecticut highways gave way to the Bronx and then to the familiar compressed geometry of Manhattan. And he called Elijah with the Bluetooth on and said, "I'm on my way back." Elijah said, "How did it go?" Oliver said, "My father wants to meet you." My mother wants to meet you. Perfectly. Both of them are handling it. Then Elijah said, quietly, "That's Oliver. That's more than a lot of people get." "I know." Oliver merged onto the FDR Drive. The East River ran silver alongside him, the bridges and the downtown skyline carrying the last of the afternoon. He thought about the question carefully, the way Elijah always made him think carefully about questions that deserved it. He said, "I think I will be." Immediately. "But yes, I made soup. In case you hadn't eaten." Oliver laughed, and it was a real laugh, undefended and loose in his chest. He said, "Of course you made soup. I'm from Atlanta." Oliver shook his head, still smiling, with the city around him and Elijah's voice in the car and the October light flat and golden across the river. He said, "I'll be there in 30 minutes. I'll be here," Elijah said. Oliver kept driving, and beyond it the dense, indifferent, extraordinary city that had kept their secret for 4 months, and then released it into the world on a Thursday night in October, because someone took a photograph and thought it was beautiful. And it was beautiful. And it had cost him something real and given him something back that he had not known he was missing. He did not know what the next weeks would look like. He knew there would be more conversations. He knew his mother would need time she had asked for honestly. And he was going to give it to her. He knew his father would do things wrong before he did them right. And Oliver was going to let him try. He knew the office on Monday would have its own version of this to navigate. And he was going to walk through that door and stand at his desk and be exactly who he was. And he knew that in 30 minutes, Elijah would open the door of his apartment, with soup, in a kitchen that smelled like garlic and something warm. And he would look at Oliver with those steady, clear eyes, and the particular quality of being known would settle over Oliver like a hand against a wrist on a rooftop in October. That was where the road ended. For now. Right there. Extraordinary fact of being known by someone who chose to stay.